Hello everybody and welcome to my mid-year book freakout tag. The middle of 2020 is here. I can't quite believe it. I'm filming this on the 28th of June just because I know I'm probably not going to finish any more books before the start of July, and that way I can get this filmed and uploaded for you guys. This is one of the most beloved booktube tags. Almost everybody does one every year, and I just started doing mine a couple years ago. But it's a super fun way to wrap up your reading for the beginning of the year. So yeah, I'm going to leave the creators and all the questions tagged in the description box below. And let's just get right into it. So the first question is probably the hardest one, and that is, what is your favorite book you've read so far in 2022? For this one, I definitely have to go with Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is a slice of life, high fantasy, low stakes dream of a book. This follows our main character Viv, who is an orc barbarian a la D&D style, who has gotten her last final payout and a fantastic relic she has kind of gained, and decides to get out of the game of adventuring, of being a barbarian, and instead decides to open up a coffee shop in this tiny little town called Thune. She had discovered coffee when she was in a dwarf town while one of her adventures, and fell in love with the idea of a coffee shop where people could come in this community and enjoy a good cup of coffee, maybe a pastry, and just sit and have a relaxing time. And that is exactly what this book is about. It follows Viv as she decides to start up this coffee shop, as she makes friends in this town, and they all come together to create this wonderful space. It's so cozy and just so heartwarming. It's sapphic as well, which is fantastic. And it's just such an adorable book. I saw somebody describe it as being like the coffee shop AU Dungeons and Dragons story of your dreams. And that's exactly what it is. All of the characters are precious, and the actual story just warms your heart. There's a giant cat, like direwolf style, but it's a cat. And it just comes and wanders in and out of the shop as it pleases. There's Viv, who's the orc barbarian. There's Tandri, who is a succubus who wanted to study at the local university. There's Thimble, who's my new favorite thing on the planet. He's a little rat man and he likes to bake pastries. There's Pendry, who is a little, like, farm boy who likes to play the lute and sing. And it's just so incredibly heartwarming and wholesome, and I highly recommend everybody give it a go. It's so, again, low stakes, and you know you're gonna have a good time reading it, and I couldn't stop smiling the entire time I was reading it. So this, like, was easy for me to pick this year. Next up is to pick the best sequel you've read so far in 2022. I have only read 2 sequels all year, which is insane because I wanted to kind of whittle down my sequels collection on my TBR shelf. That's apparently not happened, and that's my realization happening this month. But out of the 2 sequels, which were both for the same series, I decided to choose The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. Late last year and early this year, me and my friend Rachel over at Constellation Library held a winter night along, which was where we were reading the entire Winter Night series along with the rest of you guys, and we culminated with The Winter of the Witch this January. I adored this. This was the first time either of us had read the final book in this series, and it was so stunning. This series follows Vasya, who is a young Russian girl in a kind of medieval fantasy-inspired Russia. This series is full of Russian folklore and fairy tales and has so many different, like, spiritual demon-type characters in it. That's an incredible source of magic. And Vasya is a young girl who lives kind of on the outskirts of Moscow, or in the northern area of Russia. Her father is a lord of this village, and she has these kind of abilities and this tenaciousness and this ferociousness of her young girl that's not typical of her age or her gender. She defies all of these boundaries, and she ends up becoming enrapturing the attention of a frost demon named Moroskov. And kind of adventure ensues. It follows her growing up from her childhood into her early teens and her beginnings of being a young adult, and it's just incredible. The way that folklore is weaved into the story is so whimsical and so magical and really easy to follow. It's got that quality of historical fiction that you know it's set in like a real place and is very inspired by medieval Russia and all the politics and day-to-day life that you would expect, along with the folklore element to it. It adds that historical element to it that's so engaging. Vasya was an incredible character, and all of her family members were fantastic characters. Morozkov was an incredible, like, anti-hero, I guess you could say, because he's not only a frost demon, but he's also the, like, god of death, basically, in this world, in this folklore. So he's not a protagonist, he's not a hero, he's kind of an anti-hero, and I love him. And it's just, the story was incredible, and this culmination was so satisfying. I don't think I've ever felt so satisfied by a series end. This book made me sob. I could not stop crying at the end of this book. I don't think I've violently cried that much while reading a book in a very long time. And it's like the highest praise I can give this kind of book, if you know me at all. But anyway, this 100% is the best sequel I've read this year. Next up is to name a new release that you haven't read yet, but you really want to. I've got 2 for this one that I've decided to show to you guys. The first being Four Aunties and a Wedding by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This is the sequel to Dial A for Aunties, which I read last July, and I absolutely adored. This is a hysterically funny, kind of rom-com, kind of just comedy, kind of whodunit, all wrapped up into one. I guess you could describe it as a cozy mystery. That's how Kayla described it when she included it in her Cozy Mysteries reading vlog, but I'm not quite sure if it counts as a cozy mystery because it's just so much comedy. This is the sequel. This follows Maddie Chen in a new adventure. Dial A for Aunties followed Maddie, who is a photographer that worked for her family business with her mother and her 3 aunties, where they ran a wedding planning business. She was the photographer. One auntie was a chef, or a baker. One was a singer. One was a seamstress. They all kind of worked together to make this company, and Maddie took the photos, but that wasn't her goal in life. It wasn't her dream. One day her mother sets her up on a blind date and she accidentally ends up killing him, and the 3 aunties and her mother all band together to kind of hide the body, but it's happening at the same time that they have a massive like Chinese Indonesian wedding happening on a like island off the coast of LA with like 2,000 guests, and it's like super high budget, super fancy, and they kind of have to tote the body along with them as they try and continue to save their business. And there's also a bit of a second chance romance happening at the same time because the manager of the hotel happens to be Maddie's ex-boyfriend from university. It's very convoluted. It's ridiculous, but it is ridiculous in the best way possible. Again, I couldn't stop smiling when I read Dial A for Aunties, that I'm so ready to read Four Aunties and a Wedding. I can't wait for it. It's going to be so good. Next up is Home Field Advantage by Dahlia Adler. I am so excited to read this. This is a queer YA cheerleader gets the quarterback type story, but it's gay, and I can't wait. It says on the blurb at the front, nothing can get in the way of chasing their dreams except chasing each other, and I think that's just precious. I read Cool for the Summer by Dahlia Adler last year. I listened to the audiobook and I really enjoyed it. I loved her way of representing bisexuality, and in high school it was kind of like a Grease retelling almost, because there was like a summer love that happens to come to their high school later. But regardless, I am so excited to read this. Basically what happens is our main character is named Amber, and she wants to be cheer captain more than anything, but then her plans kind of get derailed when the quarterback is actually killed in a car accident. I think it's a car accident, yeah. So both the team and the squad are kind of railed by this insane tragedy. And then on top of that, watching this quarterback get replaced by a new like all-star named Jack, who happens to be short for Jacqueline, is insane, is just like the icing on the cake of a bad situation. The team doesn't want to be led by a girl, doesn't want to see their old quarterback outshined by a girl, and the cheerleaders are all on the team's side. So for Amber, she has to kind of rally with her girls to get Jack out. However, Jack and Amber are starting to fall for each other. I think it's going to be adorable, and I absolutely can't wait. I've heard nothing but good reviews for it, and I know it's going to be a really great time. Next up is to name your most anticipated sequel for the second half of 2022, and I have 3. The first is Babel or Babel by R.F. Kuang. I'm so excited for this. I know barely anything about it, but it's been one of my top anticipated releases since I found out it was being made. It is a POC-led dark academia story set at Oxford, where R.F. Kuang actually has studied, and it looks like the dark academia dream. that I need. I've been very hit or miss when it comes to dark academia, but I think this is going to be right up my alley, and I am so excited to read it. I still haven't even read The Poppy War, but I am just so pumped for this. It's going to be so good. Babel is releasing in September of 2022. Next up is Well Traveled by Jen DeLuca. This is the 4th book in the Well Met series, the Ren Fair series that Jen DeLuca has created. This is one of my favorite adult romance series I've ever read. It started with Well Met, then we got Well Played, then we got Well Matched, and now we're getting Well Traveled, and I am just so incredibly excited. This follows Dex, who is the kind of lead singer of a traveling band that goes along and travels all the Ren Fair cycles all across the US every summer. And it also follows Lola? Is that her name? Lola, I think, who is the sister of Mitch, or the cousin of Mitch, sorry, from Well Matched, who's been in all of them so far. I'm really excited about this one. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how these characters interact, considering we've only gotten to see them as side characters and or just like blips, mentions across the rest of the series. So it's going to be really cool to get their stories. I love all of these books in this series. I've rated all of them 5 stars. It's just up my alley. The Ren Fair setting, the romance is adorable. The characters are great. I know I'm going to love it. It's going to be a really good time. And then the 3rd book is Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. This is the 2nd book in the Bright Falls series. 1st book being Delilah Green Doesn't Care. This follows Delilah's sister Astrid as she's kind of trying to reinvent herself after the events of the 1st book. She gets this contract to renovate this inn that's been a staple of Bright Falls for a TV show. However, the contractor that's been hired is actually the daughter or the granddaughter of the owners of the inn and doesn't want to make any changes. It's sapphic, it's queer. I'm so excited for it. It's going to be so good. If it's anything like Delilah Green, I'm going to be beside myself with how much I'm going to love this. It's going to be so good. And again, I can't wait for this sapphic rom-com. Cozy energy. It's going to be fantastic. Astrid was such an interesting character in Delilah Green Doesn't Care. She was kind of an antagonist almost. So seeing her character grow and develop in the next book is going to be very good. I'm very excited for it. Number 5 is to talk about your biggest disappointment. So for me, the biggest disappointment has to be Daughters of Sparta by Claire Haywood. This one I was really excited about. I'd seen it all around BookTube in the last year or so, year and a half, I believe. And I was really excited for another Greek myth retelling focused on the women. This follows Helen and Clytemnestra, who are the women at the center of the Trojan War. Or they're the princesses of Sparta, and they each marry a very big player in the Trojan War. Clytemnestra marries Agamemnon, and Helen is Helen of Troy. Helen is the often considered to be the antagonist in the Trojan War. She is the one that started it, according to the Iliad. But I was really excited to see her point of view and to see how this went in her mind, and to see Clytemnestra's point of view as well, because she's kind of the main character, I should say. She's the older sister. She is the one who is married to Agamemnon, and by the end of it, she is kind of the final say that we get in this story, I should say. I think what really disappointed me about this was the fact that it kind of lacked the feminist perspective I was expecting. It didn't go the places that I expected it to go, and it kind of fell into a lot of the same traps when it comes to historical documents about women. Like, there was so much discussion about how much they were, like, not anticipating the lives that they were wanting to, or being given, basically, the lives they were forced down, the paths they were forced down. But it didn't really take it any further than that. It didn't take any commentary or discussion about what those lives meant and what it meant to be a woman at that time. It kind of fell a little bit flat for me. I think I screwed myself over when it came to this, because I read this immediately after I read Ariadne by Jennifer Saint, and that was just miles better in my opinion. So I think I screwed myself with this one, but I ended up giving it like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It just wasn't as satisfying for me, and it was a disappointment. Next up is to talk about your biggest surprise. And for this one, it's easy, and it's going to be Finley Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. This is another kind of cozy mystery kind of situation, mystery novel. I don't even know how to categorize this, but it's definitely a mystery. But this follows Finley Donovan, who is a single mother, recently divorced, trying to juggle her full-time author gig with her duties as a single mother with a ex-husband, baby daddy, who is very uninvolved and has kind of moved on with his life. She's living in their old house, which he's kind of renting to her. And she's just struggling. She's got a really bad bout of writer's block, hasn't had time to write, struggling to pay the bills, and is just in a kind of bad place when the story starts. She has a meeting with her agent at a like Panera in New York, and is talking about the newest book idea that she's got, and somebody overhears her and mistakes her for a hitwoman and asks her to kill her husband. In the kind of chaos that ensues, she kind of unwittingly accepts the offer for the money and gets caught up in this crazy adventure. Again, this is ridiculous, but it is so funny. I don't think I expected this to be as funny as it was. I should have, because I picked it up on recommendation from Kayla when Kayla was talking about this series in her blogs. So I knew I should have known I was going to love it, but this was so good and such a great surprise. I read this in one go. It just absolutely floored me with how funny it was and how much I loved Finley as a character. I thought she was so interesting and not like picture perfect, not like other girls. She was just a very down-to-earth and great protagonist to read from, and to see her struggles and her feelings as she's going through this crazy moment in her life was incredible. I really love this, and I can't wait to read the sequel. And then there's actually 2 sequels, and I think the series is going to continue. So I'm really excited to keep going with this series, and this was definitely my biggest surprise of the year. Next up, let's pick a new favorite author, and this one was kind of hard for me because I haven't read a lot of new authors that really wowed me this year so far. But I think I have 2. The first is going to be Jennifer Saint, who wrote Ariadne, and I read this back in April, I want to say March or April. I loved this book. I thought it was a really great Greek mythology retelling. As you could tell from when I was talking about Daughters of Sparta, I think this one did it much better. I rated this at 4.5 out of 5 stars. This one really got to me. It made me feel emotional. It made me really connect with Ariadne as a character, and it had that kind of feminist perspective I was hoping for. It wasn't quite as up to this level of Madeline Miller in my mind, but it was a very close second. And I really loved it. The vibes were immaculate. The descriptions were lush. And the characterization was really complex and interesting, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't know a lot about this story going into it, which I think was an advantage for me because I got all the surprises and like all of the interesting plot points. I got to see all of them coming. And I think it really helped with this story, but I really loved the character of Ariadne, and I really think Jennifer Saint did a really fantastic job with this retelling. I'm super excited to read her next book, Electra. And I think I can put her up there with a top favorite. Other than that, I'm also going to actually pick Becky Chambers. I read A Psalm for the Wild Boat. I listened to the audiobook earlier this year, and it was a pleasant surprise. This is the first book in the Monk robot series, I believe is what it's called. It's a sci-fi novella that takes place in like a distant future in which all robots have kind of become autonomous and decided to put down all of their tools and just go off into the wilderness, basically. A representative would come out every like generation to kind of see how humanity's doing and to see if they're needed. But they just kind of put down their tools and walked away. So this follows our main character, who's a non-binary monk who interacts with a robot. They are the one that the robot encounters when they come out into this wilderness, and it's just them kind of discussing humanity and what it means to be a human. They discuss technology and its role in humanity's existence and moving forward and what holds them back. It's a really great look at like nature versus technology, and I really enjoyed it. It was a really great little like think piece almost on what life is like and what makes being a human human. It was really existential. It was really thought-provoking. It was very philosophical. It wasn't very much plot. It was just them kind of talking, kind of chatting while they go on a little pilgrimage. But I really enjoyed it, and I definitely want to continue the series and pick up more of Becky Chambers' work. I'd never really looked into it before just because I'm not a big sci-fi person, but this kind of sealed the deal as something that I would definitely continue to read in the future. Next up is my favorite question, and that is your new fictional crush, and I have 2. The first one that I'm going to pick is 100% Delilah Green from Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. I adore Delilah. Delilah is a fantastic character. She's a character who all her life kind of felt on the outs. She lost her mother at a very young age, and then her father remarried, She gained a stepmother and a stepsister, and then her father dies. She's always been kind of different and weird, and she's queer, and nobody really understands her, and she feels very lost in her family, very on the outs, very outcast-like, and she ends up leaving as soon as she can. She leaves her small town of Bright Falls, she leaves her stepmother and her stepsister, and moves on with her life and becomes a photographer in New York City, which is her dream. Delilah is very reserved. It's obviously, she puts on a front because the title of the book is Delilah Green Doesn't Care. She puts on this front that she's not affected by things, but she is actually very deeply affected by things. She cares deeply about her sister, and she has so many repressed feelings of anger and sadness and kind of unresolved family trauma, but she is so caring and so considerate. She's so funny, and she's just willing to do anything to protect her sister, regardless of whether her sister knows it or not. Her relationship with Claire in this book is absolutely precious, and seeing the two of them kind of reconcile after knowing each other in high school and childhood, and seeing what they grew up to, what the other person grew up to be like, and reconciling that with what they knew them to be when they were younger, and pushing past stereotypes, pushing past memories, and learning to love somebody for who they are now. And I thought it was beautiful. Her relationship with Claire's daughter was precious as well. It was really sweet. And I adore everything about Delilah. I think Delilah is absolutely an incredible character, and I'm obsessed with her. My other fictional crush is 100% Charlie Laster from Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Charlie's precious, and I love him so much. He is the love interest in this book. He is a book editor who's considered to be very upfront, very blunt, very tactless, rude by many definitions. But what he really is very focused and very into his job. He is obsessed with his job. He loves it very much, and he's not very good at hiding his feelings. He doesn't feel the need to. He's very honest, and again, that comes off as being quite blunt. But he's super sarcastic, and he's very witty and funny at the same time. He's very clever. And the romance between him and Nora in this made my year. This is one of my favorite books I've read this year, and Charlie is a big indicator of that. I love him so much. You read this book, you'll get why. Charlie's everything. And then next up is to pick your favorite character, and for this one, I'm again going with Delilah Green because I just ranted about Delilah Green for so long, and you can see why I love her. But then also I'm picking Nick Nelson from the Heartstopper series. Nick is like my favorite little golden retriever boy. I love him so much. I loved watching his journey with his bisexuality and learning how to navigate this new friendship with Charlie and all these changes that are happening in his life. I think he's precious. I think he cares so much about his family and so much about his friends. He stands up for what he believes in. He stands up for his friends. He stands up against bullying and hatred and intolerance, and does everything that he can to protect his family. And I'm just obsessed with him. I love him so much. Between him and the graphic novel and him and the TV show, he has a special place in my heart. And then moving on to the next question of a book that made you cry, Heartstopper Volume 2. This book made me feel so seen. The first book I really loved, but it didn't hit me as much as this one, because this book goes more into Nick and Nick's journey of figuring out his sexuality and coming to the conclusion that he's bisexual. And I resonated so much with his story. It hit me like a gut punch, and I cried so much by the end of it. But like happy tears. And I'm so obsessed with Nick and his story, and I can't wait to continue with the series. But this book made me sob in the bathtub when I finished it, and I've never had a graphic novel really hit me this much. I've never had a YA novel really hit me this much, and this did it. This did it. Next up is a book that made you happy, and I've got 2 answers for this one as well. The first one is Read Between the Lines by Rachel Lacey. This is a sapphic adult romance following 2 main characters, Rosie and Jane. Rosie is a bookseller. She owns a bookstore called Between the Lines that she inherited from her mother. It's a family business, and it's her pride and joy. She loves lesbian adult fiction, and her favorite lesbian adult romance novelist, Bree, who's a pen name, is somebody that she's been dying to meet and is her absolute favorite author. Rosie's become really good friends with Bree online through Twitter. They've become really great friends, and it's potentially leading to something more. Jane, on the other hand, is a daughter of a property developer. She's the manager of a family business as well, and they are actually the owners of Between the Lines bookstore location, and they are planning on tearing the building down and evicting Rosie. What neither of them know, as they kind of become this enemies type situation, is that Jane is actually Bree. Bree is her pen name. She is the romance author that Rosie has become so close to online, and the two of them have to kind of navigate this mistaken identity kind of situation. I'm obsessed with this book. I love it so much. It's kind of destroyed because I accidentally dropped it in the bath, but this was such a fun, queer, cozy rom-com. But it dealt with some really interesting issues about like family and family expectations and what you leave behind, what you take forward in your life, and it was a really great story. I really enjoyed it. The second one is definitely The Princess Trap by Talia Hibbert. This is my newest Talia Hibbert, and it's just solidifying with me that Talia Hibbert is my favorite romance novelist. I'm obsessed with her. This follows Cherry and Ruben. Cherry is a like HR specialist that works in this school, and she's very like sure of herself, very confident. She's in her 30s and she's just kind of done with men. Ruben, on the other hand, is actually a prince. He's a prince of a kind of fictionalized Scandinavian country, and he's sick of his position. It says on the back, the outcast royal is rebuilding his reputation, all for a good cause, but he can't resist a pretty face. When he meets Cherry, they kind of get into a very hot and heavy situation right away, and they end up accidentally getting photographed by paparazzi because Cherry doesn't actually know he's a prince and a famous person. And so the two of them have to kind of put on a fake engagement situation in order to save Ruben's reputation. And it was just precious. I love a good fake dating trope. I think Talia Hibbert does it fantastically. Danny Brown solidified that for me. But I'm obsessed with this book. It was so cute. I loved it so much. I loved Ruben's bisexual representation. I thought it was fantastic. I loved their relationship. I loved Ruben's family and like his grandmother and his found family with his bodyguard and his assistant. They're all just fantastic characters. Cherry herself was a joy to read. She's just a light in a kind of dark world. It dealt with some hard topics, but overall this book just gave me all of the fuzzy feels. I absolutely adored it. Next up is the most beautiful book you've bought or received. I'm going to do one of each. First being the most beautiful book I received this year. This was a present from my dear friend Sal. And I'm obsessed with it, and it is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. Look how beautiful this cover is. I am so obsessed with it. This is a adult fantasy novel that follows a kind of Celtic folklore. It's a really long description, but it says at the bottom, with unforgettable characters, a spellbinding plot, and gorgeous world building, A River Enchanted is a stirring story of duty, love, and the power of true partnership, and marks Rebecca Ross's brilliant entry on the adult fantasy stage. I think it's inspired by Scottish folklore specifically, but that's all I really know about it. I'm very excited to read it super soon. I need to talk to Celine about it once I do, but I am just obsessed with this cover. I think it's absolutely stunning. And then a book that I purchased that I think has a beautiful cover is going to be Electra by Jennifer Saint. This is the sequel, or not the sequel, but the second adult Greek mythology retelling from Jennifer Saint, the author of Ariadne. This follows three main characters actually. It follows Cassandra, Clytemnestra, and Electra. And it again is a retelling of the Trojan War. So kind of like what Daughters of Sparta meant to me. I'm hoping this is going to live up to my expectations from Ariadne and kind of make up for the disappointment that is Daughters of Sparta. So it's all very like full circle moment here when it comes to this tag, but look how beautiful that cover is. I am obsessed with this style of cover. I think it's really beautiful. Finally, the last question on this tag is to name a book that you really need to read before the end of the year, and I have a couple options here. First off, I'm going to pick Tower of Nero by Rick Riordan. This is the fifth and final book in the Trials of Apollo series, which is a sequel series to the Percy Jackson series. He started with Percy Jackson, then moved on to House of Olympus, and this is the third series taking place in this world and in this timeline. As I would expect, this series follows Apollo, who after the events of the Heroes of Olympus series ends up getting banished to Earth by Zeus as punishment for his actions. And he is banished in the body of a 14-year-old human, or demigod I guess, named Lester, who has acne, is incredibly socially awkward, and has no magic. He has been tasked with fixing all of his oracles, which were damaged at the end of House of Olympus, or Heroes of Olympus. And he is forced to work with Meg McCarthy, who is a daughter of Demeter and a very annoying little child. I love her so much. But this is just following Apollo as he kind of learns what it means to be a demigod, what it means to be a human, and learns the power of friendship and starts to believe in himself a bit more, and what he's capable of without his magic. And I think it was a really great series. I'm really excited to read this, but I'm also kind of putting it off because I don't want this series to be over. But I need to read this by the end of this year because it's ridiculous that I haven't read it already. It came out last year. Next up is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I, again, can't believe I haven't read this yet. I've had this on my shelf for like over a year. I've started reading it and put it down just because I wasn't in the right frame of mind. But this, I've heard, is one of the best adult fantasy series to exist on this planet. This is inspired very much by the real Second Sino-Japanese War. And it is kind of set in an ancient Chinese setting. One of the reviews on the back says, this book starts as an epic buildings roman, and just when you think it can't get any darker, it does. Kuang pulls from East Asian history, including the brutality of the Second Sino-Japanese War, to weave a wholly unique experience. I've heard this is dark. I've heard this is brutal, very violent. But I've also heard that all of these characters will touch my heart in a very significant way. And I am so ready to start this series very soon. I'm hopefully going to be reading it next month, but don't quote me on that. Next up, this is another one that I need to read because of Celine, and that is The Beautiful Ones by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. Sylvia Moreno Garcia stole my heart with Mexican Gothic, and I absolutely need to continue reading her backlist, this being one of them. Celine has read this like 6 times in the time frame since I bought it, so I really need to read it. But this is another kind of, I think it's adult fantasy, following our main character, Nina, who's kind of like a socialite, kind of like Regency era style socialite in a very different world, not in the Regency era. It's not historical fiction. It says they're the beautiful ones, Loselai's most notable socialites. And this spring is Nina's chance to join their ranks, courtesy of her well-connected cousin and his calculating wife. My camera died halfway through filming, so I apologize for that, but let's keep going. So as I was saying, but the grand season has just begun, and already Nina's debut has gone disastrously awry. She's always struggled to control her telekinesis. Neighbors call her the witch of the old house, and the haphazard manifestations of her powers make her the subject of malicious gossip. When entertainer Hector Aubrey arrives to town, Nina is dazzled. A telekinetic like her, he has traveled the world performing his talents for admiring audiences. He sees Nina not as a witch, but ripe with potential to master her power under his tutelage. With Hector's help, Nina's talent blossoms, as does her love for him. But great romances are for fairy tales, and Hector is hiding a truth from Nina and himself that threatens to end their courtship before it truly began. It seems like kind of a mix of witchy, magic-y, Pride and Prejudice vibes, and I am here for it. Finally, the last book that I need to read before the end of the year is The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid. I have heard nothing but praise for this book. This is a adult fantasy debut that is centered on Hungarian and Jewish folklore. That's all I really know about it. I think it's enemies to lovers. I am not quite sure. I think there's some romance in it, but I don't think it's particularly romance heavy. I could be very wrong. I have no idea. I'm going off of vibes, and I don't want to know too much about this before I get into it. I've heard it is violent, so I'm going to keep that in mind, and dark, but I am incredibly excited for this, and I need to read it very soon. It's been on so many TBRs, and I need to just do it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments below what your favorite and least favorite book of 2022 is so far, because I'm really curious to know, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, because it really does help my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I put out new bookish and writing videos every week, and I hope you guys have a lovely day. Bye-bye.